Around the world, 9 million criminals behind bars. Armed robbers, rapists and murderers. Most surrender to incarceration, but some fight back and escape. Tonight, 4 escapes in 4 years. No wonder they called him Badness.
It's not a natural thing, a human being caged.
The world's first helicopter escape.
We just didn't know what was happening at that time. You know, it was such an unusual thing to happen.
And a mass breakout from death row, the biggest in US history.
They were death row inmates. They had nothing to lose by killing us.
This program contains reconstructions. The prison breaks are real. At Majesty's Prison, Pentridge, in Melbourne, Australia. Inside, 1,500 hardened criminals. Watching them are 250 prison officers. There are 6 watchtowers. The entire complex is surrounded by razor wire. It's one of the country's most hated prisons.
Pentridge is a horror place. It has a history of men who've been there for decades, who've been hanged, who have been left in their cells to rot. A place of torture, of beatings, of solitary confinement, of suicides.
Inside its walls, 23-year-old Christopher Dean Binse, on remand for armed robbery, a career criminal and a serial escapee. His nickname, Badness, was well and truly deserved.
He is a very evil fellow who'll stop at nothing to achieve his aims, and that's shooting at people to commit his crimes, which are generally crimes of armed hold-up.
Some people try and work out a way to beat the system, to, you know, play the horses or cards or whatever, you know. I try and work my way to beat the system and escape.
On the 28th of August 1992, Bin's escape starts with a twist of fate.
Next thing I know, two quick jabs. I thought I'd been punched, you know.
You'd be vulnerable in the showers. Because, you know, you'd be standing there with no clothes on and no protection whatsoever. And they probably just grabbed all of him and someone, you know, kept sticking the shiv in several times.
I nearly died of loss of blood, and the base of my spine was severed, and so was my bowel.
Suffering multiple stab wounds, Binse is rushed to St Vincent's Hospital in a critical condition. He's placed in a high-security locked ward. Armed guards are posted, keeping watch 24/7. Fighting for his life, it would seem there is little chance of escape. But authorities had yet to learn. Never underestimate Binse. Mecklenburg Correctional Center, Boynton, Virginia, USA, 1984. Claiming to be escape-proof, it holds the worst of the worst. More than 360 of them.
It was just waiting for it to explode, tell you the truth. They were rough, tough guys.
Get out the door!
The tightest security was for convicted killers, the death row inmates.
They were just very dangerous. You know, they was unexpected, you know, tell them what they might do.
On death row, 6 vicious killers, sentenced to die by the electric chair, are scheming to escape.
They were death row inmates. They had nothing to lose by killing us. They had nothing to lose.
Heading the escape plan, the Briley brothers, James and Linwood, serial killers.
Linwood and James Briley terrorized Richmond during the late 70s with a series of rapes, robberies, and murders.
The Briley brothers killed without mercy. Among their 11 victims, 2 elderly women, a pregnant mother, and her young son.
They broke into the house. They raped the woman, shot her, shot the 5-year-old boy, and then beat the husband to death with a bed slat.
The other members of Death Row 6 were equally repugnant. Lem Tuggle raped and murdered a 52-year-old woman only 4 months after being released from prison for strangling a 17-year-old girl. Earl Clanton strangled his neighbour to death over $8. Willie Jones killed and stole an elderly couple's savings, shot them and set them on fire. And Derek Peterson shot and killed a shop owner in cold blood during a robbery.
They didn't deserve to draw the same breath of air everybody else does.
The Death Row Six was so serious about breaking out, they formed an escape committee.
Any kind of problem that popped up, you had to clear it through the committee before you could take any kind of action at all, because the escape overrode everything here.
They watched each guard's every move, noting their routines.
They watched us close enough to know who could wear whose uniform. They watched us close enough to figure out who was going to be on duty.
They began collecting an arsenal of weapons, one knife for each man.
They hid them in the wall. They had chipped out a brick or two and had pasted over it and had it hidden in the wall.
They even managed to extract prison radio passwords from one of the guards.
Inmates are some of the most experienced manipulators in the world. They talk to you, they question you, and if you don't watch what you say, you might tell them your whole life story.
The Death Row Six are almost set to go when some news on the prison grapevine puts them in a spin. Another gang of prisoners is planning a full-scale riot. If that happens, the prison will go into lockdown, making escape impossible. The Death Row Six can't afford to wait. It's now or never. Mountjoy Prison, Ireland, 1973. Known ironically as the Joy. A grim fortress just a stone's throw from the centre of Dublin.
It's not a pleasant place to visit, and it's not a pleasant place to spend your life.
There were 4 wings, each with 3 levels. Up to 550 prisoners were housed here. Universally hailed as the roughest and toughest institution in Ireland.
It occupies a central part in the Irish criminal psyche. Over 500,000 prisoners have gone through the doors of Mountjoy Prison. The vast majority of them are ordinary criminals.
But in 1973, one wing of the Joy held a very different type of prisoner.
There was a whole wing given over to the IRA prisoners in 1973, and these were kept separate from the ordinary criminals.
The Irish government had introduced a law making it an offence for simply being a member of the IRA. And B block of Mountjoy Prison was filling up with IRA prisoners. They numbered almost 100 men. Among them were 4 of the IRA's senior figures: Seamus Toomey, Kevin Mallon, J.B. O'Hagan and Joe Cahill, each sentenced to between 1 and 5 years. Locking them up was a coup for authorities.
The government of the Republic, which had promised to crack down hard on the IRA, saw these as key figures, and they made a lot of publicity about their arrest and imprisonment in Mountjoy.
The IRA organisation was in danger of crumbling, and they believed that their 4 key men had to be freed at any cost.
Without their knowledge, without their ability, the IRA campaign may have not moved on, but they were very experienced personnel.
The Irish Republican Army, both inside and outside of Mountjoy Prison, were desperate to hatch an escape plan. Incredibly, that escape plan practically fell into their laps as an IRA member watched television. The programme was a drama about a prison break, using a helicopter as the getaway vehicle. If the IRA could pull it off, this would be a world first. Melbourne, Australia, 1992. Armed robber Christopher Dean Binse, also known as Badness, is under close watch in a hospital jail. After a prison stabbing, he is fighting for his life, or so it seems. Binse spends 10 days in his room, located on the hospital's 7th floor. The ward is sealed by deadlocked steel-plated doors, with prison guards on watch day and night, inside and outside Binse's room. A totally secure medical fortress. Sometime between 8 and 9 p.m. on Tuesday, the 8th of September, Binse has a visitor.
The story is that the female visitor smuggled in a firearm, handgun, believed to be hitting in the boot on an ankle. Sit next to Christopher Binse in bed and probably passed the gun to him there.
When the guard near his bed turned his back for a second, Binse made his move. He pointed the handgun at the back of the guard's head.
It's a traumatic situation to have a gun pointed at your head, having threats made, not knowing what might happen in the next few seconds.
A few things were said. He was very, he's going to be, how can I say it, cooperative in my attempts to flee.
Binse forces the guard to open the first deadlocked door. In the control room, he threatens the second guard.
That officer in the control room, again, he would have been terrified and thinking, my God, he's got to kill him. So he done the right thing, he opened the doors.
Binse gets into a lift. It takes him to the ground floor. He then runs through the emergency department carrying the gun. Wearing only a hospital gown, he runs out of the building and along Victoria Parade and vanishes into the night. Binse has turned tragedy into opportunity and pulled off the perfect escape. Boydtown, Virginia, the Mecklenburg maximum security prison, where 6 remorseless killers, all sentenced to death, have planned the unthinkable. A mass breakout from death row.
The criminal mind, when you don't care, you already on death row, you can think up anything. And it might work.
May the 31st, 1984. After months of planning, the Death Row 6 are suddenly forced into action. Other prisoners are planning a riot, bound to put the prison into lockdown. If they don't move now, they may never find another chance. They retrieve homemade knives from a secret stash. All 6 are armed and ready. Late in the afternoon, they're escorted to the rec yard for routine exercise. Prison guards have no idea an elaborate escape attempt is playing out right under their noses.
They're manipulators, and they're good at it.
Watching the prison guards closely has provided the 6 with valuable information. Firstly, they know that a toilet in the cell block, used only by guards, is never locked. Secondly, they've noticed their guards getting complacent and no longer taking head counts after exercise break. These 2 fundamental oversights are all the gang need to launch their escape. As rec time finishes and the prisoners are marched back into the cell block, the Death Row 6 create a diversion. As they reach the guards' control room, one of the 6, Earl Clanton, slips into the unlocked toilet.
Once you take over the control room, you got control of that part area.
Without noticing Clanton missing, one of the 2 guards in the control room flicks the automatic switch to lock the prisoners back into their cells. To give Clanton access to the control room, the prisoners need to lure one of the guards out. One of the prisoners asks repeatedly for a book. His incessant whining finally gets the better of the guards.
Okay. They just left the guard down. for a split second. That's all it takes.
The officer makes an ill-fated move, stepping out of the safe zone and leaving the door open. It's the moment the Death Row 6 have been waiting for. Prisoner Earl Clanton charges out of the toilet, barreling into the control centre.
Clanton made a big run for the guard's box, and he was turning the knobs before the guard even realized what was going on.
All hell breaks loose. They overwhelm the guard in seconds. But taking over the cell block is one thing. Getting out of the front gate to freedom is a much bigger challenge. Dublin, Ireland, 1973. Mountjoy Prison. Among its inmates, almost 100 members of the Irish Republican Army, including 4 key leaders: Seamus Toomey, Kevin Mallon, J.B. O'Hagan and Joe Cale. The IRA had come up with a plan to helicopter their bosses to freedom, a form of breakout never attempted before. A breakout that would expose a major weakness in the prison.
These were the hardcore of the IRA prisoners, and it's extraordinary how little security there was.
The key to the IRA escape plan was the vulnerability of the prison warders.
The warders obviously weren't armed, and they wouldn't accept guns. There were 6 policemen in the prison, only one of whom was armed. It's kind of an extraordinary thing when you think about it. There was no military on duty, and yet you had, a serious terrorist organisation and revolutionary organisation in your midst.
The airlift would require precision timing and surprise, total secrecy, second nature to the IRA.
This was an extremely well-planned escape. I think an amazingly well-planned escape, audacious, everything. And for that to happen, there was obvious communication between the IRA inside the prison and the IRA outside of the prison.
As a decoy, the prisoners had planned a game of Gaelic football to allow the chopper to land on the prison pitch at 3:30 p.m. 10 days earlier, an American known as Mr. Leonard had booked a joy flight for 3 p.m. on Halloween.
A handful of prisoners in the prison knew that the escape was taking place. They knew it was going to be in D wing of the prison at 3:30 or thereabouts on Halloween in 1973.
On October the 31st, the football match kicked off as planned at 3 p.m. in the D wing exercise yard. On the other side of town, Mr. Leonard arrived on time for his pre-booked 3 p.m. flight. At Mountjoy, a group of prisoners had gathered to watch the decoy game of Gaelic football.
The prison authorities marked out the pitch in a Gaelic display, and if you know a Gaelic display, it has a large circle. And the whole idea of that was to give the chopper the indicator that that was where to land.
Just 8 guards were on duty. 4 prisoners were scanning the dark skies.
It was like watching a tourist walk through Manhattan. Everyone was looking up, watching for the chopper.
But the chopper was nowhere to be seen. The pilot, Thomas Boyes, had thought the joy flight would be cancelled due to the overcast conditions, and he'd gone for a long lunch. And with no chopper pilot, the breakout looks doomed. In Melbourne, Australia, 23-year-old Christopher Dean Binse is now on the run.
A prisoner awaiting trial in Melbourne has escaped from St Vincent's Hospital's high-security ward. Police say guards were forced to open a secure door on the hospital's upper level when the man produced a revolver. Police have described him as dangerous. They're investigating the theft of a panel van from the nearby exhibition building's car park and say it may have been used for the getaway. 23-year-old Binse was awaiting trial on 3 counts of armed robbery and had been placed in the hospital after being stabbed in a prison incident.
Bleeding profusely from his wounds, Binse has vanished into the night. Police helicopter, car and foot patrols are dispatched immediately.
Binse was a very dangerous person, both when he was committing crimes and on the run. He was always armed with a handgun.
But they were looking in the wrong state.
I was in Sydney by the next day. Too much heat for me in Victoria. I was splashed all over the news, so went there where it wasn't so tropical.
7 days after Binse's escape, police still had no idea where he was, and Binse had a problem.
I need quick money, and so I just decided to rob a bank.
This gave the police the breakthrough they needed. An informant tipped them off that the bank robber was Binse.
Armed hold-up squad police began watching his home in Pittwater Road, Boronia Park, near Gladesville last night. Detectives swooped, acting on information that one of the men was an escapee from Melbourne. Binse will also be questioned over Monday's robbery at the Commonwealth Bank at Chatswood, where a gunman fired his way out through a glass door. Melbourne detectives are tonight on their way to Sydney to seek Binse's extradition.
It's almost like a bonus. It's like winning Tesla. To get somebody back like that after a short period, because you expect it to be months.
It was prison again for Binse, this time in a different state. Parramatta Correctional Centre in Sydney, New South Wales, the oldest jail in Australia. It houses some of the nation's most dangerous criminals.
Within a week I've arrived there. I'd already worked out a way to escape, you know.
Chris always looked for a way out, and Chris never saw a brick wall as being more than a collection of bricks with a bit of mortar that wasn't particularly strong, right?
The first thing Binse needs is a hacksaw blade.
It was thrown over to us from the wall, over the wall. You know, we managed to thrown over a certain location at the jail.
He makes a rope.
2 pairs of bed sheets just torn in half, and then tied in knots and hooked up together.
It takes Binse 2 weeks to saw through the bars of his cell window. At 2:15 p.m. on the 25th of October 1992, he lowers himself out of the window with the bedsheet rope and onto the roof.
But before I actually got airborne, I had to scale the razor ribbon around the thing. If my foot had got caught in that, I would have died.
Binse jumps an astonishing 4.5 metres onto another roof.
I made it. Just my imprints are on the roof to this day, on the tin roof to this day.
An officer in the watchtower spots Binse. He aims and fires, but the bullet misses.
I had some ropes I had tied together, fashioned together. They were supposed to be hooked up to the toilet pipe, the air thing. I hooked that over. I went to abseil across, down, but across in a perimeter fence.
Binse's sheet rope breaks, and he crashes 6 metres to the ground, breaking his wrist in the fall.
I couldn't feel it at the time because I'd already been shot at, you know, and my adrenaline's pumping. And I was in like no man's land, in the sterile zone. One tower here. All they would have to do is spit at me, you know, like really. I'm only 10 feet from them on their walkway, the catwalk, you know.
In a hail of bullets, Binse climbs the perimeter fence and vanishes again. October the 31st, 1973, Halloween. The Mountjoy prison escape plan to airlift 4 senior IRA members to freedom was not going well. The helicopter arranged to fly them out was a no-show. The pilot was having a long lunch. Finally airborne at 3:25 p.m, the now furious Mr. Leonard orders the pilot to land in a nearby field to pick up his camera equipment.
When I landed in the field at Strands Valley, the passenger I took from Dublin got out, and 2 men approached the helicopter, were heavily masked and armed.
While one IRA gunman held boys at bay, the other climbed on board and ordered the pilot to fly to Mountjoy prison. It was now 3:40 p.m, and the plan was running dangerously behind schedule. At the prison, one of the intended escapees, Joe Cahill, thinking the plot had come unstuck, returned to his cell. A total of 23 prisoners remained in the yard, watched by 8 unarmed guards.
I was actually coming down at the front of the prison when I heard the helicopter coming in, and I thought it was the army.
The helicopter came into view above the exercise yard.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable to think that a helicopter came into the prison. It was like something you'd see in a film. A lot better than Steve McQueen's Great Escape.
When you saw where you had to land, what was your reaction?
I was a bit concerned.
Why?
Because the area was so small, so restricted.
Despite his fears, Boyes was forced to land the helicopter. The 8 unarmed guards thought it was a surprise visit from a senior government official.
They honestly believed it was a flying visit from the Free State Government Minister for Justice.
This gave the prisoners the advantage of surprise.
We just didn't know what was happening at that time. You know, it was such an unusual thing to happen. Nobody ever expected to see a helicopter landing in the D yard in Mountjoy.
Seamus Twomey, Kevin Mallon and JB O'Hagan sprint for the chopper.
My job was to make sure that the screws on the outposts in the exercise yard didn't make the move to try and prevent Kevin, JB or Seamus from entering the chopper.
To buy their mates time, the remaining prisoners hauled back the guards.
Oh, what I saw was I ran up. The chopper was in the air then. It was landed. And the guys running, getting into it. And one guy saying to the others, keep back. You couldn't hear him, but you could say he was, keep back.
3 got in the back. And the door was closed and off we went.
And up we went. And we just looking up at it. And just powerless. Powerless. Just couldn't do anything.
But the chopper's in trouble. It has a full fuel tank and, with 5 men on board, it could be too heavy to clear the walls. Mecklenburg Prison, Boynton, Virginia, 1984. The Death Row 6, led by the Brierley brothers, have just overwhelmed a guard in a brazen attempt to escape. Officer Milton Crutchfield is first on the scene.
In a split second, I hear someone say, "Hey man, don't make a move." I say, "Hey man, you got it." I could feel a knife around my throat. I didn't have no gun or nothing but my billy club, my radio.
Officer Ricky Chavez is next.
I said, "Don't hurt me." And the clan said, we taking this building. We escaped it.
As other officers run into death row, they're overpowered, stripped of their uniforms, and bound and gagged.
It got right rugged there. I was afraid.
Caught by surprise, the officers realised struggling is futile.
I think it was 8 more officers lying down on the floor, handcuffed, T-shirts, underclothes. That's all they had on.
One of the Briley's told us before they closed the door, if something happens and they don't leave, that he's gonna come back and start killing us.
The Death Row 6 put on the guards' uniforms. One of them mans the control room. Using prison radio and security codes obtained from a guard, he sends out a distress call.
Got a 1010 in death row. We request assistance immediately.
These 6 killers have done the impossible. They've taken over death row.
And we got one captain, and we got everyone on the compound.
Ready to make their break from the prison, they drag the captain to the control room, threatening to kill him unless he gets the main gate opened.
Front gate, we've got a bomb scare. I need a van to come to the back gate. It's an emergency, please.
The front gate agrees to send a van. The escapees now have a way out, if they can reach it without being recognised. They dress in riot gear, with helmets concealing their faces. To create a phony bomb, they place a TV set on a stretcher and cover it with a blanket.
Can you imagine a bomb being as big as a TV and people on death row making a bomb that big? I mean, it was hilarious.
4 carried a fake bomb on the stretcher. The other 2 carry fire extinguishers. Realistic from a distance, their ruse isn't as convincing at close quarters. And as they make their way towards the van, they're relying on prison guards maintaining their distance. At meters from the van, a guard stumbles across them.
Stop! What? It's a bomb! It's a bomb!
Falling for the ploy, the guard runs for cover. In seconds, the escapees are in the van. Passing unchallenged through the prison gates and speeding off into the Virginia night. The largest death row breakout in US history.
It was just sinking in that we had actually got out. We was on a high like you wouldn't believe, and it was all natural. I mean, we was excited and screaming and hollering and just having a good time.
Everybody thought Mecklenburg was escape proof, you know, and then you have 6 death row inmates just walk out. I mean, who would have begun to imagine death row? This made history.
With nothing to lose, authorities fear the 6 ruthless murderers will go on a killing spree. Mountjoy Prison, Dublin, Halloween 1973. In the ultimate trick or treat, a hijacked helicopter, dangerously overloaded with 3 escaping IRA bosses, is struggling to clear the prison wall.
But how would it look for the IRA for that escape to go wrong? Say the helicopter crashed. It would have made the IRA look like total fools to attempt something so ridiculous.
With a gun to his head, pilot Thomas Boyce has no choice. He drags the helicopter into the air. It climbs slowly up and over the prison walls. The escapees have made it.
Up she went, no problem, and off. The screws were just bewildered.
The helicopter took off. O'Hagan looked down. He could see all the prisoners dancing in the yard. The warders really didn't know what was happening. One of them shouted ridiculously, "Lock the gates, lock the gates."
The gates had no relevance to the escape, but that was frustration and panic.
The alarms went off in the prison, but there was nothing anybody could do.
As for Joe Cahill, all he can do is watch through the bars of his cell as his ticket to freedom disappears.
Had the 4th prisoner been put on board, she wouldn't have lifted. Now, that would have been a disaster for everybody. So God works in strange ways.
The outrageous escape of the 3 most important prisoners in Mountjoy Prison sent shockwaves through Ireland.
This was a very serious problem for the Irish government. They called an emergency session that night. This was a huge propaganda coup for the IRA.
We celebrated that night with Republican songs, rebel songs, cheers, right into the late night, into the early morning, maybe 1 or 2 a.m.
The helicopter and pilots were discovered at a racecourse a few miles from the prison. Thomas Boyce was unharmed.
If I'd wanted to die, I could have dived the machine to the ground and killed a whole lot of us if I'd wanted to. But I'm too young to die.
The escape triggered the largest manhunt ever staged on Irish soil.
This is the Alouette 2 helicopter which was used in the escape. It was hired about 2 days ago by a man that Irish Helicopters Limited took to be an American. His name was Mr. Leonard.
20,000 personnel, military personnel and security personnel were on a drag hunt for these people.
But they found no trace of any of the escape trio, nor of the mysterious American, Mr. Leonard. The embarrassment for authorities was intense.
No one was injured. It was a kind of a harmless thing in a way, and therefore it generated a lot of positive publicity for the IRA, and that they were so well organised that they were able to take this key 3 members of their organisation out unscratched. Once the escape took place, they realised Mountjoy was completely unsuitable for a security prison, and about 10 days later, 5:30 in the morning, the IRA prisoners were all woken up and put onto buses and brought down to a high security prison in the Midlands in Portlaoise and stayed there.
The escapees were hidden through a network of IRA safe houses. Then, in December 1973, Mallon was captured, 50 miles from Dublin. 2 years later, O'Hagan was arrested, just 5 miles from the prison. And in 1977, Seamus Twomey was captured in Dublin after a high-speed police chase. All 3 were incarcerated to serve out the remainder of their sentences, this time in a high-security prison. In Sydney, Australia, armed robber Christopher Binse is on the run again for the second time in 6 weeks.
A dangerous prisoner is on the loose tonight after a daring escape from Parramatta Jail.
Christopher Binse was in Parramatta Jail on remand, awaiting trial on armed robbery charges. Last month he escaped from custody in Melbourne, but was recaptured after a bank raid at Chatswood in Sydney. Late yesterday, Binse sawed through metal bars in his cell, climbed over a barbed wire fence, then fled in a waiting car. Police say he may be dangerous and should not be approached.
He would be one of the most dangerous criminals to ever have been on the run.
For over a month, Binse hid out with a criminal associate in rural Victoria.
It's uncomfortable because you don't know if someone recognises you. You have to be always very private, concealed, you know.
Binse concealed himself for 6 weeks. Then at 8:50 p.m. on the 5th of December 1992, police pulled over a van driven by Binse's friend, Edward Jockey Smith. Smith tried to shoot his way out.
He lived by the gun and last night died by the gun in the car park of the Farmers Arms Hotel near Ballarat. Smith was stopped by a lone police officer checking a stolen car. Drinkers ducked for cover as Smith produced a revolver and fired shots into the air.
2 hours later, police raided Smith's hideout at Glen Lyon, near Ballarat in Victoria. They made an extraordinary discovery: Christopher Dean Binse.
Oh, I was ecstatic. I thought this was one of our finest moments.
Badness was to spend the next 13 years in prison. In 1995, he cut his way out of his maximum security cell and was recaptured in the prison grounds. Binse was transferred to the Supermax facility at Goulburn Correctional Centre in New South Wales, where he was shackled 23 hours a day. In 2005, he was released from jail. Soon after, he threatened to shoot 2 nightclub employees. He was sent back to prison.
The leopard never changes its spots.
I'm a leopard whose spots have faded, begun to fade.
A recidivist criminal. He's a career criminal.
Christopher Binse, there's always a cell waiting for you.
In April 2008, Christopher Dean Binse walked out of prison a free man. Mecklenburg Prison in Boydtown, Virginia, 1984. In the largest death row breakout in US history, 6 dangerous murderers are now on the run. Peterson and Clanton lay low in the small town of Warrenton, over the Carolina state line, 30 miles from the prison. The remaining 4 steal a pickup truck and head 360 miles north to Philadelphia. Back in Warrenton, Peterson and Clanton, still in prison guard uniforms, buy some cheap liquor at a gas station and hang out in the laundromat next door, getting plastered. But minutes later, the escapees are recognised by a passing patrol car. The party's over.
They were arrested on the inside the building, just sitting there.
Peterson and Clanton are back in custody. Meanwhile, Lem Tuggle and Willie Jones are heading for Canada.
You assume they're going to go to the big cities or go somewhere where they can blend in. You know, so never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that, you know, these folks were going to come to Vermont.
In the state of Vermont, just 7 miles from the Canadian border, the street-smart felons' luck runs out. They're lost. To make matters worse, they're running out of fuel and cash. With a butcher's knife, Tuggle heads off on his own to rob a local souvenir shop.
When she opened the cash register, I pulled the hunting knife. She just backed away from the cash register. She never said nothing, I never said nothing. So I think we was both just scared to death.
The shop clerk immediately calls police. Within minutes of leaving the store, Tuggle is spotted by Lieutenant Dan Bagybink.
You figure nothing will ever happen because nothing does, and then boom, there you are.
Before I could get away, a cop pulled in behind me. When he did, you know, I knew it was all over there.
We then ordered Tuggle out of the truck and down on the ground and, you know, proceeded to take him into custody. At that time, he had a wad of money in his pocket, which, you know, we believe he got from the robbery. He also had a very large butcher knife, probably, you know, 10 to 12 inches long, stuck in his belt.
The next morning, realizing his cohort isn't coming back, Jones calls his mother. She convinces him to call it quits, and 11 days after escaping, he turns himself into police. But the most dangerous duo is still at large, James and Linwood Briley.
We were really afraid that they were going to go on another killing spree because, after all, what did they have to lose? They were already sentenced to death, so it really didn't matter.
The Briley brothers are lying low in Philadelphia. Incredibly, they take jobs at a local mechanic shop owned by a friend of their uncle.
Around here in the neighborhood, in the hood, just regular guys. Ain't seen like any different. I mean, it was from the country. They had a southern accent. They would help me with a little bit of work that would come in. But other than that, just mess around with girls and holler at them and sit out front. It's a Latino neighborhood. The Puerto Rican girls in the summertime look pretty good.
But the good times are about to end. Back on death row, the recently captured Lem Tuggle is lapping up his newfound notoriety.
I mean, he had a big smile on his face. He acted like he was a big celebrity. He made the comment to one of the guys, "I'm going to make you guys famous."
With fame going to his head, he rats on the Briley brothers. The FBI heads straight to Philadelphia.
The game was on, as we say in the business.
They stake out the Briley's uncle. The FBI's surveillance leads them straight to the garage where the brothers are working. A heavily armed SWAT team pulls up in front.
And I was the first one out. When I jumped out, James Briley stepped out of the garage. I pointed my pistol at him, prone him out on the ground, handcuffed him.
But did Officer Mike Carbonell have the right man?
I wasn't 100% sure, but I remember from reports that he'd been shot in the stomach and the bullet went through. So I pulled up his shirt and he had an entry-exit scar. You know, then I knew it was him.
Linwood is also taken in. The Brileys have been recaptured. Earl Clanton, Derek Peterson, Lem Tuggle, Willie Jones, James Briley and his brother Linwood were all put to death on the electric chair.
They were bad men, evil men, yes. And they got what they deserved, in my opinion.
Strapped to the chair, Linwood Briley simply smiled and said, "I had my 19 days. They couldn't take that away." Next time, a self-proclaimed innocent soldier attempts an escape from paradise.
It's impossible, absolutely impossible. With all the cameras showing, not happen.
They used brains and brawn to break out of their supermax.
I mean, they really were sort of, criminal masterminds.
And the Alcatraz escape they didn't want you to know about.
He finally made it, and he broke the escape-proof myth.